We begin this hour with Hillary Clinton's big launch. A lot of talk about how her speech yesterday positions her against all of her potential Republican opponents. But there is another key question here. How much room did she leave for challengers that she faces in her own party?
Top 25 hedge fund managers making more than all of America's kindergarten teachers combined, and often paying a lower tax rate. When does my hard work pay off? When does my family get ahead? When? I say now.
That speech yesterday, notably heavy on populist economic themes, heavy on cultural liberalism, notably heavy on the kind of rhetoric you might expect to hear from Elizabeth Warren or from Clinton's primary rival, Senator Bernie Sanders.
We have to stop the endless flow of secret, unaccountable money that is distorting our elections, corrupting our political process, and drowning out the voices of our people. We need justices on the Supreme Court who will protect every citizen's right to vote, rather than every corporation's right to buy elections. If necessary, I will support a constitutional amendment to undo the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United.
Clinton also listed off what she says will be her top priorities as president. It was a veritable checklist of the priorities of liberal activists.
I will propose that we make preschool and quality child care available to every child in America. Lift the crushing burden of student debt. I believe you should have the right to earn paid sick days. That you should have the peace of mind that your health care will be there when you need it without breaking the bank.
Now, in a way, the tone and message of yesterday's Clinton launch was jarring, at least if you remember the tone and message that defined the first Clinton presidency back in the 1990s.
The era of big government is over.
Triangulation, they called it. A Democratic president sounding like, well, not a Democrat. It was key to the strategy that helped Bill Clinton win the White House twice in the 1990s. And it was a numbers game back then. When it came to winning national elections, the Democratic coalition just wasn't big enough. Before Bill Clinton, there was Walter Mondale.
The American people will have to pay Mr. Reagan's bills. The budget will be squeezed. Taxes will go up. And anyone who says they won't is not telling the truth to the American people.
He ran as a traditional liberal. He won just one state against Ronald Reagan.
I accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
Michael Dukakis didn't do much better. He lost 40 states in 1988. So Bill Clinton tried something different. He pitched his message away from the Democratic base to non-liberals, to swing voters. He was for the death penalty. He was for free trade. He signed the Defense of Marriage Act. He said he wanted to end welfare as we know it. And it worked. Clinton turned huge swaths of the country blue in 1992, and he kept them that way in 1996. Back-to-back national victories, the first for any Democrat since FDR. But now think about that strategy. And think about how Hillary Clinton has been talking lately on immigration.
Make no mistakes. Today, not a single Republican candidate, announced or potential, is clearly and consistently supporting a path to citizenship. Not one. If Congress continues to refuse to act as president, I would do everything possible under the law to go even further.
On criminal justice.
It's time to end the era of mass incarceration.
On voting rights.
I'm calling for universal, automatic voter registration. Every citizen in every state in the union.
Notice a pattern? It's the opposite of triangulation. She is aiming straight at the Democratic base. And why? Because her campaign thinks the math has changed. that the Democratic coalition has grown so much in the last 20 years that all Hillary needs to do now is turn them out. Not everyone's on board with this, though. Democrats from red states see danger in a full-on embrace of the left. That's not good for the country, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin told the New York Times this week. But the Clinton strategy gets a strong endorsement from the architect of Barack Obama's 2012 campaign. If you run a campaign trying to appeal to 60 to 70% of the electorate, you're not going to run a very compelling campaign for the voters you need, says David Plouffe. And actually, Plouffe relied on the same strategy in 2012. It worked then. It may work for Hillary, too. But as we've seen these last few years, winning an election is one thing. Being able to govern effectively after an election is another. All right, and back with me now, our panel, April Ryan, White House correspondent with American Urban Radio Networks, Philip Stutz, a former campaign manager for Bobby Jindal, and Democratic political analyst Blake Zeff, editor-in-chief of the soon-to-launch Cafe.com. So I want to get into this question from two angles. One, I want to look into Hillary sort of embracing the left from the angle within the Democratic Party, and then also what that means for the general election. Let's start within the Democratic Party, though, and think about this speech yesterday in terms of she still has to get through the primaries. I know we talk about what an overwhelming favorite she is, and she is, but she's facing particularly a challenge, I think, from Bernie Sanders. So Bernie Sanders was asked about this speech yesterday. Let's play what he had to say.
I thought she touched on some of the important issues facing this country, but I think the devil is, of course, in the details. The question is, who has the leadership capabilities to take on a billionaire class now whose greed has no end at a time when 99% of all new income is going to the top 1%.
And when Bernie Sanders talks about this, he says the devil is in the details. So she sounds very progressive. He's saying some of the details he's talking about, I think, are, he said she should have a position on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. She doesn't. Minimum wage, she says she's for raising it, but will she go to $15 an hour? That's what he's calling for. Social Security, he says he wants to expand it. She hasn't made that commitment yet. Debt-free college, this idea of debt-free college, she seemed to endorse it yesterday, but what does that mean? How would she go about doing that? So how much room is there, Blake, you listened to that speech yesterday, how much room is there for somebody like Sanders to get to Clinton's left the way Obama did in 2008?
I think they're doing, they being the Clinton campaign, are doing everything they can to really try to forswear that possibility. They really learned their lesson from last time. They're not looking 15 steps ahead like they did, frankly, last time, which was absolutely detrimental. I think they were a bit dismissive of Obama initially, really took it for granted and did not clamp down the way they needed to. So they're really determined not to do that. But I was struck by something watching the video package you just did, which is so much of what the Democratic Party is doing today is not just the opposite of what they were doing in the 90s, but is almost a repudiation of what Bill Clinton did in the 90s, where you're talking about on LGBT issues, for example, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act. NAFTA is part, kind of a precursor to what we're seeing now with TPP. Crime. Hillary Clinton gave this big speech on mass incarceration. That's a big legacy of the Clinton era and that crime bill. So very interesting to see that this is very much, as I was saying, a repudiation of that era, and Hillary Clinton is in touch with where the party is today, not where it was in the 90s.
So how about Bernie? Somebody like Bernie Sanders. I say Bernie Sanders. You also got Chafee out there. You got O'Malley out there. The one who seems to have at least some energy behind him is getting these big rallies is Bernie Sanders. Is there room for him, April Ryan, after what you heard from Hillary Clinton?
Almost definitely there is room, because I think yesterday was somewhat of a reaction to Bernie Sanders and his message to the left. And also Elizabeth Warren. People are listening, and she's realizing people are hearing what they're saying, and it makes sense. So I think what we're seeing is reaction. But one thing I also want to find out from Hillary Clinton's camp is health care, as we're dealing with this health care issue and this possibility of what could happen from the U.S. Supreme Court. I would love to hear where she stands on that. We didn't hear about trade yesterday, and we did not hear about health care. So that's something that we need to hear as well.
So, Philip, let me ask you in terms of the general election implications, because there's a lot of conversation this week about this idea that the Clinton campaign is embracing more of a sort of mobilize the base strategy, whereas when Bill Clinton was running a generation ago, it was, hey, we got to find these swing voters and pick them off. And there's been some criticism of that, but the confidence you hear when you talk to people on the Democratic side, talk to people around Clinton, is they say, look, the numbers are there. The numbers were there for Barack Obama in 2012 if we could get those voters out. The numbers were there in 2008. If we do it again in 2016, the numbers are there for us. Have the Democrats reached a point where if they turn their people out, they are the majority party in this country?
No. But what I'd say is your piece was very informative and very good.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, because I thought it was very well done. But here's one thing I'd add in there. You're not talking about the messenger. You're talking about the message. And Bill Clinton and Barack Obama were incredible messengers. And I don't know if Hillary is a great messenger. If she talks about her family, I thought she was a great messenger, like I saw yesterday. But 43 of the minutes she spoke, she didn't. She talked tactics, she talked issues, and she was very stilted. And that has to resonate in those key target states. The Electoral College is in the Democrats' favor, there's no doubt. Yep. Republicans have to grow the women vote, they have to grow the minority vote. We know this. This is what we're working on inside our party. But their messenger better be dang good or they're going to be in trouble.
But I think the messenger yesterday hit on a key point that America is talking about, the economy. She was talking about the tax code. She was talking about this infrastructure bank, you know, to help with what is it, building roads, railroads, bridges, you know, the infrastructure. She talked about FDR. You know, that's what happened with FDR, the interstate system, and many of the federal buildings. You're laughing, but that's...
No, I'm not. She's talking about yesterday, FDR.
Okay, so and that's what she said yesterday, the song yesterday. But she's talking about now. We're trying to come out, stay out of a depression or a recession or what have you, and this is what she's trying to look forward in building an infrastructure bank and things of that nature. So I think the messenger delivered a message of hope, I believe. It remains to be seen, but I think she delivered a message of hope.
Let me ask you, Blake, though, that question of personality, though, we're always asking, you know, how important is it to voters that they like or can relate to the candidates or whatever. And you look at what happened to her in 2008 in the Democratic primaries, and I do think that personality might have been a part of that. There was more of, it seemed to a lot of people that it might have been more of a draw to Barack Obama's personality than Hillary Clinton's. You talk to Republicans, that's one of the reasons a lot of them seem optimistic about Marco Rubio. Mm-hmm. They say that the same thing that happened to her in 2008 with Barack Obama in the primaries could happen in a general election with Marco Rubio, with this sort of an exciting background, a chance to make history, all of those sorts of things.
I think in primaries it's a little bit different than in general elections, right? Because in a primary, Obama and Clinton, I mean, there was a big difference on the Iraq War. Obviously, that was a crucial part of that primary, but I think a bigger part of it was Obama really captured people's hopes. You know, yes, we can, hope and change, all that kind of stuff. A lot of that was personality driven, and I think that ultimately did help him a great deal. In a general election, I mean, just to go back maybe 30 minutes ago, you had Larry Sabato on saying that the candidates are a little bit overrated in the general election, and I think Philip's sort of taking issue with that. But I think what he's meant by that is that you do have certain basic facts about demographics, voter trends, the Electoral College. And one other thing I'd say that I think Philip, with all due respect, was glossing over a little bit, which is if you look at the issues that Hillary Clinton and frankly Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary are pushing, these are issues that are actually popular widely in a general election. So immigration reform, right? Minimum wage, crime reform, you know, in terms of mass incarceration, all that kind of stuff. So Mitt Romney had a problem in 2012 when he was seen as going too far to the right in the primary to win the primary, because then he had to sort of figure his way out back to the center. I don't think Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or whoever emerges from the Democratic primary is going to have that problem this time, because the issues that the Democrats are talking about are widely popular throughout the entire country.
All right, Hillary Clinton not the only big launch on the campaign calendar this week. Another political dynasty getting ready for their own kickoff tomorrow. And that candidate just released his own logo minutes ago. We're going to unveil it for you and dissect it. That is next. Stay with us.